The sky above the cratered plains of Viron 6 burned violet at night, as if the stars had grown tired of watching and had turned their backs. Shalla stood motionless in the wind, the thin membrane of her cloak flaring around her sharp shoulders, her silver skin glistening with the cold breath of the dying planet. Beneath her feet, the soil, if it could still be called that, was dry and cracked, the last veins of the once living world shriveled to dust. She watched the smoke curl up from the wreckage, a human vessel, scarred, bleeding heat, leaking life. She could taste the metallic desperation in the air, the scent of ozone and panic clinging to the remains. She hated that smell. She hated their ships. Most of all, she hated them, the humans. They were intruders, a greedy, reckless species who tore holes in the stars and called the ruins progress. Her people, what few remained, spoke of them as monsters with smiling faces, disease wrapped in charm. And yet, in the twisted wreckage of the crash, something stirred. A shape, movement, not mechanical. A live dot she did not intend to approach. Her people had laws. Ancient, sacred laws that forbade contact with the Terrans after the purge. But Shalla had not obeyed a law in years. She walked closer, her long fingers brushing aside glowing debris, the heat burning her skin, but not stopping her. That was when she saw him, the human. His body was broken in half a dozen ways, twisted like wreckage, yet still breathing. Blood deep, red, and 2 warm pulsed from a gash in his forehead, and one of his eyes blinked sluggishly as he tried to focus. Their eyes were too soft. Shalla always thought that. Too full of expression, even in pain, they told too much. He looked up at her, his lips moving slowly around a breathless sound. Not a plea, not a curse, just a name, not hers, his own. Daniel, he whispered, coughing into his chest. She could have left him. She almost did. But something about the way he said it, like it wasn't just a name, but a tether to who he was, to what he had lost, it kept her still. The wind howled louder as the planet turned toward shadow, and a chill swept across the wreckage. Her mind screamed reason, protocol, vengeance, caution. But the air around Daniel trembled, thin and fragile, his life force flickering like a lantern against the dark. His other arm was pinned, his ribs exposed in a way that no being should survive. It made no sense that he was alive, but humans were like that, relentless, stubborn, unwilling to die, even when logic said they must. A part of her, the old part, buried deep beneath the hate, wondered what kind of species crawled from death just to speak a name. She knelt without knowing why, her legs folding under her, her face close to his. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "Why are you here, Karen?" The human's eye rolled toward her again, struggling, almost smiling, even his blood pooled in his teeth. "Didn't mean to crash," he wheezed. "Didn't mean to hurt anyone." That was when the ache in her chest began. Small at first, annoying, like an old injury resurfacing in the cold. Shalla did not answer. Instead, she scanned the wreckage again, her biosensors registering the damage, the radiation leak, the crumbling structure. Time was short. He had minutes. She should let him fade. One less human, one less threat. But then he did something that cracked the silence open like glass. With his good hand, shaking, he reached, not to beg, not to grab, but to offer something. A thin, rectangular object. His datapad. It was smeared with blood, flickering, almost dead. On its surface, a glowing screen showed a picture. A child, human, smiling, laughing, hair like sunlight and eyes full of mischief. A name below, Lila, his daughter. He wasn't just a Terran soldier. He was a father. A father dying alone on a dead world, still trying to show someone, anyone, that he had something worth saving. And somehow, that image slipped through her. Armor more deeply than a blade ever could. For the first time in decades, Shalla felt uncertainty, not fear, not pity, but something dangerously close to empathy. She rose slowly, glancing once more at the sky as it dimmed. Protocol be damned. She couldn't explain the reason, not yet, but she reached down, grasped his wrist carefully, and pressed her communicator against it. Her voice was soft, and the words betrayed her training. "Hold on, Daniel," she said, though she wasn't sure he could hear. "I'll get you out." The human didn't answer, but his fingers curled, barely, around hers. And somewhere, beneath the wreckage of both their worlds, something unfamiliar began to grow. Daniel awoke to the ache of his body, screaming in protest, wrapped in a dull warmth that felt foreign but not unpleasant. The ceiling above him was curved and pulsing with gentle bioluminescence, like a living creature dreaming in soft colors. He wasn't dead, though his ribs still burned, and each breath came like dragging stone through his lungs. He turned his head slowly, and there she was, the alien. Tall, motionless, her features both beautiful and terrifying in their sharp symmetry. Her eyes were violet like the sky he'd fallen from, unblinking as they watched him stir. For a moment, Daniel thought she might kill him. Maybe she'd rescued him only to question him first, find out what he knew, then finish what gravity hadn't, but she made no move. Just stood there, arms folded, her face like carved ice, unreadable. The silence between them was thick and brittle. He tried to speak, and it came out as a cough. Where am I? He managed, his voice rough, unfamiliar even to himself. The alien didn't answer at first, as if weighing whether his question was worth a response. Then she said in flawless, toneless English, "Safe, for now." Her voice didn't match her face. It had a softness to it, like someone who had once left music but had forgotten how it felt. Daniel blinked slowly, trying to sit up, and pain flared in his side. He winced. "You pulled me out," he said. "I remember you were there." Still no answer. "Why?" he asked, more quietly this time, not out of fear, but genuine curiosity. That seemed to unsettle her, and for a heartbeat, he saw something. Shift in her expression, not quite emotion, maybe memory, maybe regret. But it passed quickly. "I could not leave you," she said, as though hating herself for admitting it. "Even if I wanted to?" He chuckled weakly, but it turned into another cough. "Well, that's comforting. You hate my kind that much, huh?" She didn't deny it, didn't need to. Her silence was confirmation enough. "We destroyed something precious to you, didn't we?" Daniel asked, quieter now, more carefully. Her hands clenched slightly, a tremor in her posture giving her away. "Your kind took many things," she said. "My people. My sister. Our skies. You always take." The words weren't shouted, but they struck harder than any scream. Daniel didn't flinch. He looked at her, really looked at her, not the alien silhouette, not the enemy, but the person standing there, and he nodded slowly. "Yeah." Sighed. "We've made a mess of things. But not all of us wanted war." That seemed to bother her even more. She turned away, pacing slightly, her stride like a predator's, fluid and barely restrained. "You say that, but you still carry weapons," she said, her voice sharp. "You fly your ships into restricted space. You come to dead worlds and call them your own." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, not in surrender, but in pain of the physical kind and another deeper kind, one that lived behind the ribs. "I was trying to reach a listening post. There were signals, survivor beacons, some of yours, some of ours. I thought maybe someone was still alive down here." He opened his eyes and looked at her. "Guess I was right." She stiffened, the line of her back rigid. "You would have died for that?" she asked, as though she couldn't understand it. Daniel smiled faintly. "If I didn't try, I wouldn't be the kind of man my daughter could be proud of." And there it was again, that word, that presence. Daughter, the child in the datapad photo. It hung between them like a star that hadn't gone out yet. Shalla didn't respond, but her eyes darted to the far side of the room where the device sat, cracked but intact. She had studied it, watched the short video it held. The laughter, the tiny voice calling, "Daddy, come home." She hadn't meant to feel anything, but something in that small voice burrowed into her, something human, something she wasn't. "Sure, she hated. I'm not your enemy," Daniel said. "You don't have to believe me." "Hell, I wouldn't either if I were you. But I'm not here to conquer or spy or take anything. I just wanted to find life, any life, something left that mattered." His voice trembled then, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "And maybe remind myself that we haven't lost everything." For a long moment, she didn't speak, didn't move. Then she walked toward him, and he flinched instinctively. But all she did was place something on the table beside his bed. A small cup of shimmering liquid. He looked at it, then at her. "What is it?" he asked. Her expression didn't change. "It will help you heal." He hesitated, then reached for it with trembling hands, lifting it slowly. "Thanks," he murmured, then drank. It was bitter, strange, and it burned down his throat, but almost immediately, the pain softened at the edges. When he looked up again, she was already walking away. Just before she reached the door, she paused. Without turning, she said, "Your name is Daniel, mine is Shalla." Then she was gone, and Daniel lay back, staring at the ceiling, wondering why a creature who hated his species had just saved his life twice. Days passed in a blur of dim light, strange medicine, and silence that grew less hostile with each hour. The room where Daniel healed was carved into the stone of a mountain scarred by old war. It pulsed gently with power, kept warm by veins of bioenergy and the last functional technology of a world that had long since learned to stop trusting machines. Shalla came and went without warning, her presence like a shadow that brought both tension and calm. At first, Daniel could barely sit up without fire in his bones, but she tended to his wounds with quiet precision, saying nothing, always avoiding his gaze. Yet, he noticed small things. She left food near his bed, nutrient spheres that tasted like nothing but sat heavy and good in his gut. She adjusted the room's light when he winced. She lingered longer each visit, always watching but never quite ready to talk. Until one evening, when the storms howled outside and the silence finally broke, Daniel sat with his back against the wall, blanket draped over his legs, the datapad in his hands. The video of Lila played on a loop, laughing, dancing, running toward a camera held by hands far steadier than his own were now. He didn't cry, not anymore. The tears had dried on the first night when he realized he might die here, light years from the child who still waited. Shalla entered without sound, as usual, and stood at the threshold, her eyes fixed on the glowing screen, and he knew she recognized it. Without looking away, he said softly, "She was 5 when I left Earth. Almost 6, said she'd wait for me no matter how long." His voice cracked on the last words, and he quickly cleared his throat. "I didn't want to go, but the Alliance needed volunteers, and I thought if I showed her I was brave, maybe she'd learn to be brave too." Shalla didn't move, but something in her face loosened just a little. "You left your child behind for war?" she asked, not with anger, but with a kind of disbelief that came from lived pain. Daniel looked at her now, really looked. "No, I left for hope," he said. "There were rumors. Signs that someone from the old treaties might still be alive out here. I wanted to bring them back. Prove that peace wasn't just something we talked about on monuments." He paused. "I guess that sounds stupid now." Shalla stepped further in, her arms at her sides. Her voice was barely above a breath. "It sounds like something my sister would have done." That caught him. He turned his head slightly, reading the sorrow hidden in her tone. "What happened to her?" he asked gently. Shalla didn't answer for a long time. She crossed the room and stood near the edge of the bioluminescent wall, her hand resting against it as if touching memory. Her name was Vela. She believed in peace. She thought the humans could learn. She spoke your language before most of us even accepted your signals. Her voice hardened slightly. She trusted your diplomats. She went with them. When they said they had found neutral ground, she never came back. Daniel swallowed hard. "You think they killed her?" Shalla shook her head slowly. "I know they did. I saw the footage. The last few seconds before her signal died. The humans she trusted laughing as the shuttle burned around her. The silence that followed was a blade between them, sharp and thick with history. Daniel didn't try to argue. He couldn't. His heart sank, and a new weight settled in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said, and it wasn't a hollow apology. It was real, from somewhere raw and broken. "I wish I could tell you that those men didn't speak for us, that they were monsters, not ambassadors. But I know that doesn't undo what you lost." Shalla's eyes narrowed. "No, it doesn't." But she didn't leave. Instead, she sat on the floor near him, her knees folded, her long fingers resting gently on her thighs. "Do you ever think about what it costs? The hatred, the war, the history written in graves?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Every day." He turned the datapad toward her. "That's why I keep this. Not just to remember who I'm fighting for, but to remind myself what I'll lose if I stop trying." For the first time, Shalla met his eyes and didn't look away. "You are strange for a human," she said. "Most speak of strength as weapons. You speak of it as memory." He smiled, tired and soft. "Strength is knowing what hurts and choosing not to pass it on." She didn't reply, but she stayed. And for a long while, neither of them spoke. The storm outside roared like an ancient beast, but inside the quiet chamber, there was only the flickering glow of a child's smile, and 2 enemies sitting closer than either dared admit. Something was beginning to change, not in words, but in breath and silence, in the shared ache of grief, and the quiet weight of hope. The morning came in a strange hush. The usual low hum of the power lattice that warmed the stone chamber had stopped, and a subtle tremor ran through the mountains. Bones. Daniel woke with the sense that something was wrong, not the sharp, immediate panic of an explosion, but the slow, sick feeling of a world shifting out from under him. Shalla was already gone. Her absence now felt like a missing part of the room itself, like the space she left behind still carried her heat, her scent, the quiet intensity of her presence. He dressed slowly, still sore but stronger, the healing agents she'd given him doing their quiet work. When he stepped outside the chamber, into the narrow corridor of bone-colored walls, He saw lights flickering above something ancient and the tech failing, then he heard voices, not human, not hers. He ducked into the shadows, pressing his back to the curved wall as three figures moved past, tall like Shalla, but bulkier, their armor scarred and etched with symbols he didn't recognize. They carried weapons, long and cruel-looking, and spoke in a guttural version of the language Shalla had used sparingly. He didn't understand it, but the tone was clear. They were searching for something or someone. Then behind them came Shalla. Her posture was stiff, her hands bound in a glowing field of light, her mouth set in a tight line. One of the warriors pushed her forward, and she stumbled, catching herself against the wall with a snarl. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest. He couldn't stay hidden, not now. Later, he would think of it as the stupidest thing he ever did. But in that moment, he stepped out. They turned immediately. One raised a weapon. Shalla's eyes widened, and something like panic flashed through her, something too real for someone so composed. "No," she shouted in her own tongue, but it was too late. The warrior fired. The blast hit the wall beside Daniel's head, showering sparks. He fell to the ground, rolling behind a support beam, his breath ragged. "Human." One of the guards barked. "He lives." Another shouted something into a cum bead, and Shalla fought against her restraints, twisting like a flame in the wind. "He's not your enemy," she yelled. But they didn't listen. Daniel crawled behind a column, his body still not strong enough for a fight, no weapon in hand, heart pounding like a trapped bird in his chest. Then came the voice. Not from the guards, not from Shalla, but from the ceiling itself, a voice. Deep and mechanical, ancient and cracked, unauthorized Terran presence detected, initiating purification protocol. The lights dimmed to blood red, the temperature dropped. Daniel looked up in horror as he realized what that meant. This mountain, it wasn't just a sanctuary. It was a relic one of the last active war holdouts from the time of the purge. It had defenses automated, ruthless, buried deep in its stone heart, the kind that didn't care about sides. Only origin, Shalla. He shouted as the floor began to tremble harder, the hum of ancient weapon systems waking up all around them. "The place is gonna purge me." She turned, her eyes flashing. "Not just you," she said. "Everyone." The system was built to cleanse infiltrations. It sees all of us now as compromised. The guards hesitated, confused, shouting at her to explain. But Shalla didn't. She turned to Daniel instead and ran. She reached him fast, crouched low beside him as plasma rounds began to whine in the deeper corridors, discharging against stone with high-pitched shrieks. "There's a failsafe," she whispered. "But it's deep beneath the archive vaults. I can disable the purge." "Then go," Daniel gasped. "I'll stay hidden." But she shook her head. "You don't understand. The failsafe reads, 'Only one genetic signature mine, but I've been branded now. Marked a traitor. It might not accept me anymore.'" Her eyes bore into his. "But it might accept you?" Daniel stared at her, disbelief rising in his chest. "Me? I'm not even part of your system." "You are an unknown variable," she said. "The system might read you as uncorrupted." The irony hit him like a slap. The one thing that might save them all was that he didn't belong. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to leave her behind. But the look in her eyes told him what he had to do. "How do I get there?" he asked. She pulled a shard from her belt, glowing blue. "This key, it will open the path. You follow the blue veins in the stone. They lead to the core." Daniel took it, his fingers brushing hers, and for a second, he saw the fear behind her calm fear, not for herself, but for him. "Don't die," she said. "I don't want to hate your people anymore, but I can't do this again, not like Vela." He nodded, then ran out behind him. The mountain began to scream. The corridors pulsed with dying light as Daniel ran, each step echoing through the bowels of the ancient fortress like a heartbeat slowing toward silence. The shard in his hand glowed brighter the deeper he went, its blue aura shimmering against the bone-white walls that cracked and groaned as the defense protocols surged to life. Automated turrets descended from the ceiling, scanning with red beams that flickered just a second too late to catch him as he dove behind rusted consoles, breath burning in his lungs. All around him, the relics of a dead war-stirred machines built to kill without hesitation, without remorse. If he made a wrong turn, if the system failed to recognize him as non-threat, he'd be atomized before he could even cry out. But Daniel pressed on, not because he was brave, not because he wanted glory, because Shalla believed somehow that he might be enough to stop this place from ending everyone. As he rounded another corner, the air thickened. The blue veins in the walls pulsed with urgency, leading him into a chamber wider than any he'd yet seen. At its center stood a spira, Jagged structure of obsidian-like stone surrounded by a halo of floating metal plates, all humming with power. The failsafe core, but something else stood in his way. A final guardian. Not a machine this time, but a construct, half organic, half steel. Shaped like one of Shallow's people, but grotesque, twisted, a mockery of life left behind to ensure. No foreign hand ever touched the core dot. It turned toward him with no face, only a glowing triangle where a mouth might have been. Terran. Intrusion registered. You carry unauthorized key. Its voice boomed like thunder, yet it wasn't angry. It was mournful, as if it knew it had to kill him and hated the fact. Daniel raised the shard instinctively, and the construct paused. This key belongs to the line of Vela, Keeper of Peace. The name hung in the air like a ghost. Daniel stepped forward slowly. I know her sister, he said. She's alive. Her name is Shalla. She saved me. She told me to come. Here, the construct tilted its head. Shalla betrayed the preservation accord. Allied with Terran. It raised its weapon, a curved blade made of crackling energy. You must die. Daniel raised the shard higher, his hands trembling. She didn't betray anyone. She saved someone, me, and I'm not here to hurt this place. I'm here to stop it from killing her, killing everyone. The construct hesitated, the blade dimming. One Terran cannot override legacy. Daniel looked at the shard, then back at the construct. Then let me try. He stepped toward the spire. A beam of light scanned his body slow, invasive, like fingers pulling at his DNA. The spire flickered, uncertain, and then it began to open. The plates surrounding it peeled back like petals unfolding to reveal a pulsating core of light. But in that moment, Daniel saw it, a warning on the interface that had bloomed before him. A choice, failsafe override engaged. Warning, system purge may only be halted by biometric sacrifice. Confirm permanent integration? He didn't understand at first. But then the truth hit him. The system didn't just need a code. It needed a life, not a password, but presence. Something organic and foreign to embed into the circuit. Something or someone to remain behind and keep it asleep. Forever. He backed away, shaking his head. No, this isn't what she said. But deep down, he knew Shalla hadn't lied. She just hadn't known. Or maybe she had Daniel's. Fingers hovered over the confirmation glyph, his heart cracking wide open. If he stayed, if he accepted the integration, the system would cease its purge. Shalla would live. The guards. Maybe even the future of this broken place. But he'd never leave. Never see Lila again. Never feel Earth's air. Never get to hold his daughter's hand or tell her how he tried. Tears welled in his eyes. He pulled the datapad from his pocket. Lila's face glowed softly in the low light, that little voice still laughing, dancing. Be brave, Dottie, she had said, and suddenly he understood. Bravery wasn't just surviving. It was choosing to protect someone else. Even when it cost everything. Daniel pressed his palm to the console, confirming integration, the system intoned. Human presence accepted. Purge halted. As light engulfed the room, wrapping around his body in threads of living code, Daniel closed his eyes and whispered into the silence. I'm sorry, baby girl. Tell her I did it for you. Above, deep in the stone corridors of the mountain, the weapons powering up suddenly fell silent. Shalla, struggling against her captors, stumbled as the vibrations stopped. The red lights dimmed. A stillness spread through the stronghold. Then came the voice, low, steady, but unmistakably human, laced into the mountain itself. Failsafe engaged. All systems returning to peace mode. No threats detected. Her knees buckled. She knew what he'd done. Asterisk, the mountain had gone quiet. But it was the wrong kind of silence. The kind that came after something beautiful had been buried. The guards, unsure of what to make of the system's sudden stand down, looked to Shalla as though she'd summoned the gods herself. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat was locked with grief, with a kind of ache that made her knees fail and her hands tremble as she staggered down the corridor, following. The pulse that now came not from the mountain, but from something deeper, something newly awakened in the stone. She pushed past the gates of the lower sanctum, past half-shattered guardians and still flickering energy walls, until she reached the edge of the core chamber. There, she stopped. The spire still stood, but now it was changed. The petals that had opened before Daniel had closed again, but at their center, something new pulsed a rhythm. A heartbeat. One not from a machine, but from a life now fused with the very stone. She stepped forward slowly, her breath catching as the lights shifted in recognition. A voice filled the chamber, not mechanical, not synthetic, human and familiar. Shalla, it said, her name, spoken with warmth, with breath, with pain and peace mingled like two hands intertwined. It wasn't a recording. It wasn't a ghost. It was him. His consciousness embedded, living in the circuitry now, in the mountain's core. He had done it. Not just activated the failsafe. He had become it. Her knees hit the floor as a flood of memory and rage and sorrow surged through her. Why? She whispered, voice cracking. Why would you give yourself to this, to us? The light pulsed gently, like the nod of a tired soul who had no regrets. Because you saved me first, Daniel said. And because if we don't start making different choices, we're just going to burn everything we have left. She reached out to the glowing core, not to touch it, but to feel his presence, his warmth still lingering in the light. You had a daughter, she said, trembling. You told me her name. Layla. The name echoed like a lullaby between them. Tell her I didn't forget her. Tell her I found something worth saving. Someone worth trusting. That I didn't go down in a blaze of hate. I chose peace. I chose a future. Tears streamed down Shalla's cheeks, her silver skin darkened by sorrow. For the first time in decades, she wept openly, her hands clenched, not in fury, but in grief and awe. You were the enemy, she said, and you became the reason I believe again. Behind her, the guards remained silent, their weapons lowered, their expressions unreadable. But none dared approach. The air was sacred now, humming with something no blade or bullet could touch. They had all witnessed it, how a human, broken and hunted, had walked into the jaws of ancient vengeance and given himself not to war, but to mercy. Then the voice shifted, softer, fading. I don't have much time left as this. It's not built for me, but you do. You have time, Shalla. You still have a chance to show them. Your people, mine, what better can look like. She bit her lip hard, nodding once, her eyes never leaving the core. Then I will, she whispered. You have my name. Now I'll carry yours. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of promise, full of mourning, full of change. And just before the light dimmed to a steady, watchful glow, his voice came one last time, breaking like dawn. Thank you for letting me be human to the very end. The sun rose slowly over the scarred plains of Viren 6, a pale golden orb stretching light across a land that had not felt warmth in years. It shimmered over cracked ridges and broken stone, touching the old bones of cities long abandoned, lighting fires and skyglass that still clung to the tips of shattered towers. But something new stirred beneath the light, something not forged in conquest or bitterness, but born of sacrifice. Shalla stood at the entrance of the mountain stronghold, the wind tugging at her cloak, the last message from the core still echoing in her mind. She had not slept since Daniel's voice faded from the chamber, since his presence stilled into quiet vigilance. The system had absorbed his essence, not as a prisoner, but as a guardian. A sentient failsafe. The first human to ever become part of Viren history, not as a destroyer, but as a protector. She carried his datapad now, the screen cracked, but still working. Lila's face stared back at her through time and distance, her tiny smile frozen in perfect innocence. Shalla had studied her every movement, every soundbite. She had memorized the child's face, the way Daniel spoke of her like she was a star he carried in his chest. He had given everything for her future, and for the possibility that someday, maybe, his people and Shalla's might speak without reaching for weapons first. The guards who had once dragged Shalla in chains now stood behind her, silent, reverent. They had seen what she had. They had heard the human's final words, felt his choice ripple through the stone, through their own hardened armor. The purge laws no longer applied here. They couldn't. Not after this. One of them finally spoke. What do we do now? His voice was uncertain, tired. Shalla turned to him, her eyes different, now clearer. We build something that deserves the gift we were just given. Her voice held no grandeur, no command. Just resolve. We tell both sides what happened. Here, we show them a story, not the ones they're used to telling. She paused. We remind them that hope didn't come from victory. It came from a man who chose to stay behind. And so she began. It started with small transmissions. Encoded messages sent through old relay satellites. Not propaganda. Not warnings, stories, memories. A human named Daniel who chose peace. A mountain that almost killed everyone, and the one choice that saved it. And she signed every message the same way. Shalla Viren Daniel. The name confused some, angered others. But many, especially those who were tired of burying their children, listened. And in time they responded. A fragile treaty began to stir, not from politicians or generals, but from civilians. From parents who didn't want to say goodbye to their sons and daughters anymore. From scientists who had lost too many years to fear. from survivors who still believed that peace was more than a myth. Shalla led them quietly, never seeking command, only truth. She wore Daniel's name not as a symbol of defeat, but as a reminder that humanity wasn't just blood and fire. It was love too. It was sacrifice. It was the strength to die for someone else's dawn, years past. A beacon was built atop the mountain, its core still guarded by the soft hum of a human soul. It pulsed every sunrise, a signal not of ownership, but of memory, of what had been done and what should never be forgotten. And sometimes, when the night was still, Shalla would sit by the edge of the ridge and play the video again. Lila's voice would dance through the air like wind chimes, and she would whisper softly into the dusk, "He kept his promise, little one. Your father lit a path where none had been." And somewhere deep beneath her, the mountain would pulse in reply, not with words, but with heart.